Thank you, Rosemary. This is Christina Mills from the California Foundation for Independent Living Centers. I'm the Deputy Director and very happy to be co-presenting today's presentation with Sara Moussavian, the emerging leader from the Silicon Valley Independent Living Center. She is also with our Youth Organizing Disabled and Proud program. She serves as a youth organizing volunteer for SBILC as well. In addition, we have Sarah Triano, a longtime friend of mine who happens to also be the Executive Director of the Silicon Valley Independent Living Center. Today's webinar is being co-sponsored by both SBILC and Yo Disabled and Proud, as well as Yoshiko Dart, who is also with us today. Welcome, Yoshiko. Thank you for joining us, and thank you for getting us involved in this presentation. We're very happy to be a part of it. I want to start by thanking Rosemary and Mary for the e-captioning services. I believe today's webinar is going to be full of great information, and I'm looking forward to hearing the questions that some of you might have and holding the discussion further after the webinar today, having some discussions online either through social media or our website with additional questions or thoughts that you might have about Justin's vision. I'm going to turn it over now to Sarah.
All right, thank you, Christina. This is Sara Triano, and I'm going to just do a quick overview of our agenda for today. We're going to start with a statement by Yoshiko Dart. Sara Moussavian is going to tell us a little bit about Justin Dart. I'm going to cover Justin's vision for a revolution of individualized empowerment and the connection between Justin's vision and Olmsted. Christina is going to talk a little bit about the Olmsted decision and why youth with disabilities should care about it. We're going to do have a little bit of time for questions and answers, and then Christina is going to announce a poster contest. Yoshiko Dart was gracious enough to prepare for us an incredible opening statement for today that she has asked Christina and I to read. So I will be reading the first part of this, and then Christina will read the second. At the top of the statement it says, "I'm with you always, I love you, lead on, lead on. Beloved colleagues in the struggle, I love you. Justin loved you and continues to love you. Thank you for your dedication to justice every day. Thank you to everyone across the country for participating in the webinar today. My heartfelt and special thanks go to Sarah, Christina, and their magnificent youth team. Nellie Demirler, Kirk Aranda, Johnny Vallon, Rosie McDonald-Harita, Ron Lopez, Jamie Karen, Daniel Felguth, Alex Bland, and Addie Hermela from the Yo Disabled and Proud, and Kelly Lee, Derek Lee, Monica Ture, Priyanka Nukla, Justin Steinberg, Jerry Alvarez, Sabrina Clark, Joyce Yin, and Sara Moussavian from SBILC for their magnificent work in assisting, planning, and hosting this important webinar on the 13th anniversary of the Olmsted decision by the U.S. Supreme Court. In 1990, following the passage of the ADA, Justin wrote in part, "The Declaration of July 4th, 1776 gave eloquent voice to the American dream that all men are created equal. Representatives of traditional cultures first yawned and then laughed at what they saw as an outrageous combination of shameless demagoguery and childish naivete. But we Americans took this glorious, impossible vision seriously and began a long, torturous effort to make it live. Our spectacular partial successes have influenced an international cultural revolution." Christina?
On July 26, 1990, the dream lived again. With the power that could have been achieved in no other way, the message of ADA went forth through TV and print to every American community and most foreign nations. People with disabilities have the same inalienable right as other people to participate in the mainstream of society. The world will never be the same. Mr. Jefferson and Reverend King must have been smiling. Justin soon made a plan to go global, promoting the rights and empowerment of persons with disabilities. Indeed, he did make several visits to foreign countries, but upon returning from our trip to the UK and Ireland in 1997, severe heart attacks prevented him from traveling any longer. It's been 10 years today since his passing at our own home. Today, he would be so proud of you from California and the USA to the world. Thanks to our fearless, trailblazing leaders, past and present, you are now able to move forward and to take the next step. Justin said many times, I cry out to you from the depth of my being. Your lives, the quality of humanity hangs in the balance. You do have the power. You do have the right. You do have the responsibility to revolutionize your life and the lives of others for the better. You don't need any title, permission, or membership card. Just act today. Lead, lead, lead the revolution of empowerment. Yes, indeed, I believe in you. I love you. Together, but only together, united in love and truth, we shall overcome. Yo power, SVILC power, youth power, power of disability pride, we power, power of solidarity. Lead on. Thank you. Go ahead, Sarah.
Justin Dart was born on August 29, 1830, to a wealthy family. His grandfather founded the Walgreens store chain. His father was a well-known business executive, and his mother was a matron of the American Agent Grey. He called himself a super loser because he wanted to separate himself from his family, who he labeled as a super winner. He went to school at 7 different high schools, but never ended up receiving a high school diploma. At age 18, he was diagnosed with polio. At the time, his doctors told him that he had 3 days to live. He passed away from congestive heart failure on June 22, 2002, and is survived by his wife, Yoshiko Dart, and his adopted children. Towards the end of his life, he passionately publicized his vision of the revolution of empowerment. Justin was well known as not only a leader who impacted many in the international disability community, but also a human rights activist. In 1981, President Reagan designated him to be the vice chair of the National Council on Disability. Based on his position, he and Yoshiko visited all 50 states, including Washington, D.C., as well as internationally, Puerto Rico and Guam. With every stop he left, his motto regarding the Americans with Disabilities Act, saying that it was the Civil Rights Act of the future. In 1989, he was appointed the chair of the President's Committee on the Employment for People with Disabilities. During his term on this committee, he shifted his focus away from higher the handicapped to ensuring people with disabilities receive their full civil rights. In July of 1990, he, along with 2 others, stood at the podium and witnessed President George Bush sign the Americans with Disabilities Act. Later, he shared his voice and said he thought more than hundreds should have been standing at the podium witnessing the historical event. Annually, there are celebrations with the purpose of recognizing the Americans with Disabilities Act nationwide. Justin received 5 different presidential recognitions. Some of his recognitions include Presidential Medal of Freedom, given by President Clinton, which is the nation's highest civilian award. Clinton describes Dart as he in his own way has the most Olympian spirit Clinton has ever came across. In addition, he received the Hubert Humphrey Award of the Leadership Conference on Civil Rights. President Bush refers to Justin as the ADA man. That shows how much of a significant figure he was in history. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Sara Moussavian. This is Sarah Triano. We're the Sarah and Sarah show, and Christina today. I want to start by saying what an honor it is to present with Yoshiko, Sarah, and Christina on this, the 10th anniversary of Justin Dart's passing and the 13th anniversary of the Supreme Court's Olmstead decision. Sarah is a shining example of the passion and spirit the next generation of young leaders with disabilities is bringing to the disability rights movement. And Christina and I go way back to the California Youth Leadership Forum for Students with Disabilities, to standing shoulder to shoulder at ADAPT protests, to now sharing the joys and challenges of being a mother with a disability. I'm so happy to share that journey with her. And while other mentors may have come and gone, Yoshiko Dart has always been there for me with her quiet, gentle spirit and unfailing love, support, and encouragement. She is truly one of the national treasures of our movement. And each of these magnificent women have had a tremendous impact on my life, and I want to honor all four of them today, and also give a quick shout out to Rosemary, who has done a great deal of work to help us prepare for this webinar today. There's been a lot of talk recently about the next evolution of the disability movement and where we should go as a movement. Toward the end of his life, though, Justin Dart presented us with a vision for a revolution of individualized empowerment, a roadmap for where we need to go as a movement. And today, I have the daunting task of describing that vision to you, something I feel completely unqualified to do, but a challenge from Yoshiko that I accept and will try to do with love and truth in a way that will hopefully honor Justin and his legacy. Now, the first time I met Justin Dart and heard him speak of his vision for a revolution of individualized empowerment was at the 1998 National Council on Disabilities Youth Leadership Development Conference in Washington, D.C. I and about 50 other young leaders with disabilities at the conference were getting ready to meet President Clinton, and this reporter came up to me and said, "So, young lady, are you excited? You get to meet the president." "Yeah, I'm excited to meet the president," I said, "but I'm even more excited to meet Justin Dart, the Justin Dart. I mean, no offense to the president or anything, but I've been dying to meet Justin Dart ever since I read about him in No Pity." The reporter looked at me kind of funny, but after hearing this, Mark Abristo, one of our movement's greatest leaders, someone who's been a tremendous mentor for me and Justin's protege, took me by the hand and personally introduced me to Justin Dart. And when Justin Dart spoke at the conference later that day and said things like, "You have the power to lead the revolution of empowerment, a revolution to establish a culture that focuses the full force of science and democracy on the systematic individualized empowerment of every person to live his or her potential for self-determination, productivity, and quality of life," I was motivated, I was inspired, but I had absolutely no clue what he was talking about. It was only later when I and others in the National Disabled Students Union started to put into practice what we thought was a revolution of empowerment that we came to truly understand Justin's vision, and we didn't always like it. Take, for example, what is arguably the most important cornerstone of Justin's vision, and sometimes the hardest for us to accept and put into practice in the disability movement: love for all. Justin began and ended every speech in the same way. Let's listen to an audio clip of his trademark introduction and ending.
"Colleagues in justice, I love you."
Love for all. Love, Justin wrote, is the magic ingredient of empowerment. Every human being is empowered by an environment of love. Every human being is entitled to an environment of love, and every human being is responsible to contribute to an environment of love. Now, when was the last time that you went to a disability-related meeting and felt an environment of love? Tony Sauer, Mark Ramoser, and others have noted that as a movement, we're really good at the internal firing squad thing, not so good, though, at the love thing. But Justin called on all of us to take responsibility for contributing to an environment of love within our movement. Like Gandhi, Dr. King, Grace Lee Boggs, and other revolutionary leaders, Justin also challenged us to not just love each other within the movement, but to also love our perceived opponents outside the movement. He felt that this was truly one of the greatest powers we have as a movement, and often shared the following quote by Gandhi. "Power is of two kinds. One is obtained by fear of punishment and the other by acts of love. Power based on love is 1,000 times more effective and permanent than the one derived from fear of punishment." In fact, one of Justin's lasting legacies was his ability to unite people with drastically different worldviews through love. Republicans and Democrats, shoots and activists, and me and George Bush. During George Bush Jr.'s presidency, the National Disabled Students Union went after President Bush for some of his judicial nominees, including a man named Jeffrey Sutton, who argued a case before the Supreme Court that substantially weakened the Americans with Disabilities Act. Now, one morning, I get this call. It's from Justin, and he has an idea for me. "Sarah," he says, "I want you to do something for me. I think it would be a great idea if you arranged a cross-country trip with Jeffrey Sutton. Just the two of you. That way you can take him to all the institutions and nursing homes across the country and help him see the discrimination, help him understand our point of view. And during your time together in the car," he said, "you can really get to know him. Show him the love in our community and the issues we're up against." Yeah, well, at the age of 25, the last thing I wanted to do was spend time alone in a car with Jeffrey Sutton. But that was Justin. That was his way. "Destroy the injustice, but love the unjust," he wrote. So I have just a few questions for us as a movement. What would our movement look like if we lived Justin's vision of love for all and practiced advocacy through love? What would our movement look like if we recognized the humanity in others, including our perceived opponents, and saw within them the possibility for change? What would our movement look like if we truly valued people who don't agree with us and approached them with love and genuine desire for understanding? And what would our movement look like if our aim was not to win arguments, but to create community? Of course, oh, yes, I see a hand up. Okay. Oh, I'm getting applause. Yay. I'm sorry, I thought somebody was asking a question. Cool, thanks. All right. Of course, though, saying that is much easier than doing it, right? You know, when you're on the front lines at an ADAPT action and you've got an angry opponent screaming at you, let's face it, feelings of love are not exactly surging through your body. Yes, sorry, I just got a note in the chat box. Can I speak slower? Yes, I will do that. Thank you. But that is what our great spiritual leader called on us to do. And it's something we must all continue to struggle with every day until we finally achieve love for all. So, love for all is the first component of Justin's vision for a revolution of individualized empowerment that we're going to cover today. The second component of Justin's vision is government for all. Now, when Justin said government for all, most of us interpreted that very narrowly as voting and getting into political office. Many people in the disability movement are familiar with and often repeat Justin's quote, "Vote as if your life depends on it, because it does." And many folks have quite literally taken on his challenge to become government, to become a politician, and to get into politics as if your life depends on it, because it does. Few people, though, discuss the key element of Justin's vision of government for all, which was his stinging critique of our current governmental, societal, and economic systems, and of our country's materialism and militarism in particular, and his corresponding call for us to create a government for the people, of the people, and by the people, all the people. In the last 3 years of his life, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. called for a revolution in values against the triple threats of racism, materialism, and militarism. And in the last years of his life, Justin similarly called for a revolution of empowerment that directly challenges ableism, the rampant materialism within our culture and society, and the devastating effects of our country's indiscriminate warmongering. First, let's watch a video of Justin speaking where he directly challenges ableism and its connection to our current systems of society and government. Rosemary, we're ready for the clip.
With disabilities are the poorest of the poor, the oppressed of the oppressed. This does not have to be. Today, science and free enterprise democracy give us the potential to enable every person to live the human dream. Will we do it? Or will we, like great cultures past, relax in the status quo and go down the road to the land of might have been? Our present systems of society and government, magnificent as they are, have reached their useful limits. We need a clarified vision. Colleagues, we have that vision. A revolution of empowerment.
All right, so that was Justin talking about the limits of society and government to address the ableism. But 10 years before Arab Spring and the Occupy Wall Street, also known as decolonization movements, Justin also anticipated the struggle of the 99% by calling out the second threat, the rampant materialism within our culture and the resulting economic inequality. In his political platform for the 21st century, he wrote, "During the last decade, incomes of the poorest fifth of the population have increased 0.7%, less than 1%. The top fifth, 15.6%, 22 times as much. Incomes for the top 20th increased 26.3%, 37 times the increase of the lower fifth." And in his final written message, he said, "I adamantly protest the richest culture in the history of the world, which has the obvious potential to create a golden age of science and democracy dedicated to maximizing the quality of life of every person, but which still squanders the majority of its human and physical capital on modern versions of primitive symbols of power and prestige." Justin's critique of the third threat, our country's military-industrial complex and its direct effect on humanity, was long-standing. When the war was raging in Vietnam, he authored a scathing report on the human rights violations in Vietnam that was presented to the World Conference on Rehabilitation in 1966. And in his political platform for the 21st century, Justin wrote, "We must provide vigorous leadership for a world culture that removes the causes of terrorism by empowering all to live their God-given potential. This must be done not by attempting to support and police the world, but by USA becoming a dramatic model of universal empowerment. We start by eliminating the poverty gap and the prejudice and violence here at home, by creating America as a sparkling, irresistible advertisement of the good life for all. And we must develop a much stronger, more consistent, and more passionately democratic foreign policy supporting the oppressed people of the world. We must cease to subsidize regimes that systematically abuse human rights, practice violence and acquiesce in poverty. We must use military action only as an extreme last resort. We could bring more quality of life and democracy to the oppressed people of Afghanistan than 100 bombers and a regiment of Marines. In his vision, Justin directly challenged us to take on the threat of ableism. But like Dr. King, he also challenged us to take on the threats of materialism and militarism. So some questions for us. So why do most in the disability movement back away from or completely ignore that part of his vision? Is it because Justin was going where most Americans don't want to go? His challenge was not only directed to non-disabled people to eliminate ableism. All we need to do is look around us and see how much over the past 20 years the disability movement has decided, consciously or not, to fight ableism by seeking equal opportunity or a fair share in the nation's materialism and militarism. In other words, we've chosen to fight against one of the threats by enthusiastically joining the other two. Dr. King recognized that the war in Vietnam is but a symptom of a far deeper malady within the American spirit. We're on the wrong side of a world revolution because we refuse to give up the privileges and the pleasures that come from the immense profits of overseas investments. Okay, we just got a question here. Can we get a 1 or 2 sentence definition of what ableism is, please? And I see some answers popping up in the chat box. So Dr. King said this, but how many of us can say we have willingly given up the privileges and the pleasures that have come from the immense profits of the United States' longest-running illegal and immoral war in Afghanistan? And how many times have we made the business case for accessibility or employment by pushing the spending or purchasing power of people with disabilities? Justin said that our dream of an all-inclusive democracy is barricaded by our own self-indulgence. Success must no longer be defined in terms of gaining symbols of prestige that make you feel superior to other people, he wrote. Responsibility must no longer be defined in terms that permit lifestyles with major investments in conspicuous consumption, spectatorism, elitism, and escapism, investments in pushing people down rather than lifting them up. Productivity must no longer be defined in terms of raw dollars only. And in an interview with Caring Magazine in 1998, he said, "The real goals in life should not be big diamonds, gold, expensive car, an expensive yacht, or $120 tennis shoes. The real goal and true real happiness is in doing the job of a human being. This means to make the best out of your own life and at the same time make the best out of everybody's life, present and future. A human being is interdependent and you cannot maximize your own life without maximizing everybody's life. You have the power to make life better for yourself and for everybody. And I'm not just talking about people with disabilities." Which brings us to the third and last component of today that we're going to cover of Justin's vision for a revolution of individualized empowerment, responsibility for all. Justin is widely recognized as the father of the Americans with Disabilities Act and is most well known for the role he played in the passage of the ADA. His vision for a revolution of individualized empowerment, however, went well beyond the ADA. Justin challenged us as a movement and society to eliminate all what he called hierarchies of privilege and to enforce human rights for all. Let's listen to an audio clip of Justin talking about our collective and individual responsibility for all.
Our vision, America's past now, is to go forward, to keep the promise of justice for all. Envision an America for all. Envision education for all. Envision healthcare, jobs, and communities for all. We are not going to be second-class citizens anymore. we will live free and equal in our communities. We envision freedom, dignity, and life for all. We will fight to the end of time for equal access to the American dream.
All right. So in his 1998 speech at the NCD Youth Conference, Justin said, "We must strengthen and enforce the ADA and all civil rights laws. Gays and lesbians and others must receive full protection." And in his political platform for the 21st century, he wrote, "Civil rights is in an America of individualized empowerment will require protection of individual rights for all. No one will be left out. Women, men, children, older Americans, people of color and diverse languages, ethnic and religious minorities, people with disabilities, consumers, patients, workers, gays and lesbians, aliens, prisoners, and literally all who might need protection from discrimination and abuse will have it." To achieve this, Justin called for solidarity among all who love justice, all who love life, to create a revolution that will empower every single human being to govern his or her life, to govern the society, and to be fully productive of life quality for self and for all. Prioritizing solidarity work with other communities is an important part of Justin's vision, yet as a movement we often fail to acknowledge the intersections of multiple oppressions and the inherent connection of the disability struggle to the larger struggle for social justice and liberation. What kind of message does it send when we pass out anti-union McDonald's food at meetings and actions? What kind of alliances are we losing when our movement openly supports institutions like the World Bank, the same bank that actively opposed increasing the minimum wage in factories in Haiti, where workers were making less than $1.20 a day? And what does it say about our community when we oppose sheltered workshops for others and demand fair labor standards, but then turn around and deny those same fair labor standards to those who care for us, domestic workers? Justin called on us to enforce human rights for all by prioritizing solidarity work with other communities and by engaging in a process of personal transformation that would directly affect the kind of advocacy we do. The revolution of empowerment will not occur through advocacy as usual, he wrote. Again, quoting Grace Lee Boggs, "Rebellion is a stage in the development of revolution, but it is not revolution. It is an important stage because it represents the standing up of the oppressed. A rebellion disrupts the society, but it does not provide what is necessary to make a revolution and establish a new social order. To make a revolution, people must not only struggle against existing institutions, they must make a philosophical, spiritual leap and become more human beings. In order to change and transform the world, they must change and transform themselves." And it was Justin who said, "Only when I change will society and government change. The responsibility is mine." We as a people in a larger movement must consciously engage in social change and personal transformation at the same time, because we cannot change injustices in the world without also confronting injustices and the role of privilege in our own lives. As the next generation of leaders with disabilities, you've got a responsibility and an obligation to get out there and start showing the world that you and we together can move beyond this rebellion stage, advocacy as usual. We can make that spiritual leap to become more human beings, to define ourselves by what we're for rather than what we're against, and to provide a positive vision for the future. Let's hear a quick audio clip of Justin speaking about the need for a positive agenda.
Americans hunger for a positive agenda, a vision based on shared values, common sense, and a record of practical solutions. You of TASH have created the foundations of that agenda. Let us refine it and communicate it to America. I propose a revolution of empowerment. A revolution that will empower all 21st century Americans to live their God-given potential for self-determination, productivity, and quality of life.
So, we don't need some charismatic leader to achieve Justin's vision. As Justin said, we're all waiting for some magical person to come riding out of the sunset, you know, like in the cowboy movies, and save us. Well, it ain't gonna happen. Let's listen one more time to Justin calling on all of us to be a revolution of one.
Support TASH. Absolutely. Don't wait for anyone. You don't need a title or an invitation to make history. You can be a revolution of one today. Speak out, reach out, mobilize. If you can motivate, if you can activate, if you can educate just a handful of those beautiful Americans who are now spectators in the struggle, we can win. Unity is power. Let us overwhelm fear and fallacy with our vision of an America that empowers all. Solidarity forever.
So, and again, quoting Grace Lee Boggs, we are the leaders we've been waiting for. We are the leaders we've been waiting for. We've got what it takes to not only lead the disability movement, but to lead this nation and world in realizing Justin's vision of a society based on the value that every human life is equally sacred and equally worthy of optimal personalized empowerment to achieve his or her best possible quality of life, an America for all, a world for all. We must not limit ourselves to disability issues as a movement. We must show the world that disabled people are ready for the tremendous responsibility of revolutionary leadership for all. As Justin used to say, lead on, together we shall overcome. Now, I'm going to end here with just a couple more slides. Justin's vision of a revolution of individualized empowerment was spelled out in his political platform for the 21st century, which contained 14 different points. Now, we've covered 3 of those points today: love for all, government for all, and responsibility for all. We obviously don't have time to cover all 14, but I want to highly encourage all of you to visit Mouth Magazine online and study the other 11 points carefully. I'd like you to go home and ask yourself, WWJD, what would Justin do? Ask yourself, am I contributing to an environment of love within our movement? Do I love the unjust and see the possibility for change within perceived opponents? Am I, in the words of Grace Lee Boggs, living simply so that others may simply live? Have I publicly questioned the billions of dollars being spent on an illegal and immoral war instead of on things like home and community-based services? Have I done my own work to confront injustices and the role of privilege in my own life? Am I prioritizing solidarity work with other communities and taking on the tremendous responsibility of revolutionary leadership for all? Now, any discussion of Justin's vision would be incomplete without acknowledging his fight for an issue that was very personal and important to him at the end of his life: the right of all people with disabilities to live in our own homes in the community. In his speech at ADAPT's Candlelight Vigil in front of the U.S. Supreme Court on April 20th, 1999, Justin said, "This issue is very personal to me. With my disabilities, I would be in an institution or hospital if I could not afford the services which enable me to be with my beautiful family. I would rather be dead than to be locked in an institution. And in his final statement, he wrote, I adamantly protest the richest culture in the history of the world, which still incarcerates millions of humans with and without disabilities in barbaric institutions, back rooms, and worse, windowless cells of oppressive perceptions for the lack of the most elementary empowerment supports. Today is the 10th anniversary of Justin's passing, but it's also the 13th anniversary of the Supreme Court's Olmstead decision. Is it a coincidence that Justin died on the anniversary of the Olmstead decision? Perhaps, but we'd like to think that Justin somehow orchestrated it that way to remind all of us of our responsibility and an obligation to use the power of love, government, and revolutionary leadership for all to ensure, in Justin's words, that no American ever again suffers in forced isolation in an institution, a nursing home, a back room, or any other place. And with that, I'm going to turn it on over to Christina, who's going to talk about the second reason we're celebrating today, the Olmstead decision.
Thank you, Sara. And before we get started, I just want to say thank you to both Sara Moussavian and Sara Triano for their terrific work and for not only being with us today, but for sharing the importance of Justin's vision and who Justin was and what he's all about. Like Sara said, we don't have enough time today to cover all of Justin's vision, but we do encourage all of you to check out the Mouth Magazine link to find out more information. I also want to go back to the very beginning of today's presentation and thank Yoshiko Dart, who very graciously wrote the opening statement and allowed us to share it with all of you today. Like Sara said, many of us in the community don't believe that it was an accident that Justin passed away on the anniversary of the Olmstead decision. And we felt it was critical to share information about the Olmstead decision with you all today because there are many youth participating in today's webinar, and a lot of times the disability community gets very involved in talking in jargon. And I know I've caught myself, being in the IL movement for the past 13 years, I find myself using words often that youth have no idea what I am talking about. So I want to start the Olmstead portion of this presentation by asking you all to get involved and click on the check mark if you know either of these women's names. And if you don't, you can hit the X. Terrific. It looks like a really good mix of folks who know who these women are and don't know who these women are. So that's wonderful. That tells me that we probably also have a number of youth on the call. So we had 17 people that do not know who these women are. Oh, and only 8 people know who these women are. So since this presentation is being co-sponsored by Youth Organizing Disabled and Proud, I want to give out a Yo t-shirt to somebody around the country who can tell me, the first person to type in or tell us who is the woman on the left side in this picture. Woman on the left side of this photo. Who is that woman? Ah, CIO Berkeley. Lois Curtis is correct. I will touch bases with you afterwards. I believe Stacy is working from that center today, and connect with you to see what size t-shirt you would like. Now the woman on the right, can someone tell us who that is? So the woman on the right is wearing looks like a trench coat. She's Caucasian, she has short hair, and it looks like Vivian has answered it. Elaine Wilson, thank you. And I apologize for not giving a description of both of them before asking what their names are. Yes, that is correct. Lois Curtis on the left and Elaine Wilson on the right. These are the co-plainants from the Olmstead decision case that went to the Supreme Court in 1999. Since the court ruling, Lois has been enjoying life living on her own with personal care assistant services and community-based services. She has reconnected with her family and made new friends. Her own experiences with institutionalization and the Olmstead decision have prompted a passion for advocacy. The Tubman African American Museum recognized Lois with the Act of Courage Award for standing up and taking action during challenging circumstances to make a difference for herself and the lives of others. Lois has also found success in folk art and has had her art on display at several well-received shows and several galleries throughout the United States. Now, Elaine, the other co-plaintiff from the case, she, after winning the case, was provided with community services and lived in a home with a friend and care provider. She enjoyed an active life in the community until her passing on December 5th of 2004 at the age of 53. Despite being institutionalized more than 30 times prior to bringing the lawsuit forward, she developed her own advocacy skills, speaking and presenting throughout the country about her own experiences and her hopes for the freedom of other institutionalized persons. She was known and loved by many in the disability community who continued to be inspired by her determination and dedication to reach out to others once she finally secured her own freedom. And both of those citations were written by the Legal Aid Society. Both of these women had multiple disabilities and lived in the state of Georgia in a state hospital for several years. The professionals at the hospital who worked there said that both of them were capable of living out of the hospital on their own, but there were no services like personal care assistance available outside of the institution that they could get covered by their Medicaid services to live out in the community and have personal care taken care of. So that's what brought them to filing the lawsuit, the Olmstead decision case that said that based on the ADA, they were being discriminated against. On June 22, 1999, in response to a lawsuit filed by two women, who you now know who they are, residing in a state hospital, the U.S. Supreme Court ruled in Olmstead v. L.C. that unnecessary segregation and institutionalization of people with disabilities is a type of discrimination that violates the Americans with Disabilities Act. In the ruling, the court said, confinement in an institution severely diminishes the everyday life activities of individuals, including family relations, social contacts, work options, economic independence, educational advancement, and cultural enrichment. So a lot of folks that in the youth community that I work with want to know what is an institution? When we talk about institutions, we're talking about things like, for example, nursing homes or hospitals. And so here in the photos, I included an institution on the left and an accessible home on the right. Institutions are typically gated off facilities, and we have some still around today around the country, and we have quite a number of them in California as well. Many people are forced to live in institutions that don't want to be there, but they don't know that there's options to live in the community. Many youth participating in the webinar today, please ask me if you have any questions about either an institution or community-based living. So here's Lois Curtis today with her personal attendant. Each year in California, we have an annual advocacy day at the Capitol, Disability Capital Action Day. And in 2009, we celebrated the 10th anniversary of Olmstead by making that our theme for our event. The theme was actually called There's No Place Like Home, which is what is written on Lois and her PCA's shirt. Our homes, not nursing homes, I'm sorry. We invited Lois to come out from Georgia and participate in our event. It was Lois's first time flying across the country at that time, and her attendant flying with her. In fact, I think I recall her attendant saying that was her first flight ever. Lois stayed in California for about 3 days and brought her assistant with her to help her with her daily needs. In Lois's case, what she needed in order to move out of the state hospital was to have personal care assistant services 24 hours a day. And for other people, in my experience, I've heard people say that all they needed was a wheelchair. All they needed was transportation to and from their doctors. There's many reasons, very simple sometimes reasons, why people are living in institutions and don't know that they have options out in the community, just like a wheelchair or a certain type of bed or any type of assistive technology that they might need that they don't know they can get out in the community rather than in the hospital or the nursing facility. I got to spend those 3 days with Lois while she was here, and let me just say, she was a kick. When I went to the airport and picked her up, one of the first things she told me was that she was hungry. And when I asked her what she wanted, she said, "I want chicken." And I ate chicken, I think, 4 times during those 3 days because that woman wanted to eat a lot of chicken during her trip to California. And she was very, very smart. She knew she'd be meeting a lot of people in California who knew who she was. And she is a very smart entrepreneur. She brought pieces of her art. I mentioned earlier that Lois is into folk art. She likes to paint and she likes to draw. And she brought paintings to sell, and she sold some to high-level folks in California that work for the Department of Health and Human Services. But she also brought a notepad with her, and it was just a regular 8.5 by 11 memo pad. And she went up to the hundreds of people at Disability Capital Action Day and said, "Hi, I'm Lois. Nice to meet you. Let me draw your picture." And she would draw everybody's picture right then and there, and it would take her just a couple minutes. And then she would show them their picture, and she'd say, $2. And I thought that was the most clever thing in the world. And she and her PCA shared with me later that Lois keeps that money to buy more art, or more art supplies, so that she can continue doing paintings and selling them and touring around her own state to put her art on showcase. So Lois, while she was here, she spoke at Disability Capital Action Day, and she met with legislators and department officials who really were trying to implement Olmstead in California. And I think it was a great example for them to meet Lois, one of the plaintiffs behind the case, who really fought her way all the way to the United States Supreme Court to get out of an institution. And for those of you who know Lois, you know how great her art is. I wish I had something to share with you today, but I couldn't find something in time for this presentation. So I found this quote from the National Public Radio's Home or Nursing Home series, and I found it quite interesting because most of the time when I hear people talking about Olmstead, it's usually about adults. And although there are thousands of adults living in institutions against their will, there are also children and youth. And I don't often hear service providers talking about that population. Many children and youth, like adults, don't know about Olmstead or that there are community-based options available for them and their families. The quote reads, "Yearly, federal nursing home data shows that there are more than 6,000 young people up to the age of 21 living in American nursing homes, and there are thousands more who are in their early 20s. The youth I come into contact with are all about making their own decisions, and I'm sure that's the case for all of you who work with youth as well. They're usually about expressing what their wants and needs are, and so it's only obvious that youth are looking to decide what they want to do and not have other people make decisions for them. So it's important to educate youth and everyone that that Olmstead gives us the opportunity to choose where we want to live, how to access services that we need in our own homes rather than a nursing home or hospital. It gives us the freedom to come and go as we wish, and the ability to go to school or work, have families, and be a part of our community. Bottom line is, it opens the door to individual choice. So I mentioned earlier the series on NPR, Home or Nursing Homes. I wanted to give you guys the link to it in case if you're interested in learning more about it or reading through or listening to some of the audio stories that they have. Over the last few years, NPR has been going out and collecting stories from people living in institutions or at risk of moving in. And we're going to hear a couple audio clips from the series, but I want to also encourage you to check it out on your own. Our first audio clip comes from Matthew Harp, who's 21 years old. Rosemary, can you play the clip?
And when I was 21 years old, I had to move into a nursing home because my mother and my sisters could not take care of me by themselves any longer.
More than 6,000 children and young adults up to the age of 21 live in American nursing homes.
I was the youngest person in the nursing home. Most of the others were very old. I had only a few friends that would come and see me. I missed everyone very much, and I wanted to leave.
After a year in that nursing home, Matthew Harp got his wish, and this past March, he moved back into his mother's home, thanks to a state and federal program that paid for aides to come to his house 9 hours every day. In the audience tonight, there are parents of other disabled children and young adults who are now living in nursing homes.
Thank you, Rosemary. That's just one example of some of the stories that NPR has been collecting. But I think these are really relevant and really great examples of the kind of youth that are being stuck in nursing homes around the country. The next clip that I'm going to share is also very interesting because it involves a young woman who spent the first few years of her life in a hospital. And her situation was pre-Olmstead decision, and it was all because of her and her family that the federal government was able to initiate what's called now the Katie Beckett waiver. Can you play the first clip?
This story starts 29 years ago with an angry President Ronald Reagan.
We just recently received word of a little girl who has spent most of her life in a hospital.
The little girl in the hospital was 3-year-old Katie Beckett. Because of a brain infection, she needed to be hooked to a ventilator at night to breathe. Her parents wanted her home. Her doctors said she'd be better off at home. And it'd be cheaper too, just 1/6 the cost. But Medicaid, the state and federal health insurance program, would pay for the breathing machine only if the girl lived in that expensive hospital.
Now, by what sense do we have a regulation in government that says we'll pay $6,000 a month to keep someone in a hospital that we believe would be better off at home?
President Reagan changed the Medicaid rules, and Katie Beckett left that Iowa hospital and went home. The assumption was this was a kindness to the family of a child who wasn't expected to live for very long. But technology improved. These disabled children did live longer, and Medicaid's costs soared. In the 3 decades since, more than 500,000 children with severe medical conditions have been allowed to leave hospitals and get their care at home. Children like Olivia Welter.
So that clip was really important to share for a couple of reasons. One, because it was pre-Olmstead, like I mentioned earlier, but two, because many of us are faced with state budget cuts year after year for the last several years, and now we're dealing with federal budget cuts as well. And programs like the Katie Beckett waiver and Olmstead implementation are always at risk at being cut. And so when you're working with young people, I think it's really important to share with them that everybody is at risk of being institutionalized. We have rights right now, and we have freedom to be out in the community, most of us, not all of us. And I think that it's really important that in order to activate and empower youth today, we need to educate them on the things that weren't available before they were born. And I'm going to play the second clip. And before I do, I just want to mention that for those of you who don't know Katie Beckett, she was also one of the co-founding youth of Family Voices CASA, Kids as Self-Advocates, and we lost her a few weeks ago, actually. And this clip was made, I think, only a week before she passed away. Go ahead, Rosemary.
Now, maybe you're wondering, what happened to that little girl on the ventilator in Iowa who started all this when Ronald Reagan helped her move home?
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Katie.
In March, Katie Beckett turned 32. She got serenaded and a standing ovation at a convention of child health workers. She's famous to these children's advocates, but Katie says she feels most comfortable when she's anonymous, like when she's by herself reading in the bookstore.
In Cedar Rapids, it's quite different. You know, I'm the girl that they see drinking a latte at Barnes & Noble. I'm not the girl from the newspaper or from the television station.
Katie still relies upon nurses who, for an hour every night, give her treatments. She still needs the ventilator to breathe, up to 15 hours a day. And she travels the country with her mother, Julie, to continue the work they started in 1981, to win laws and programs to help people with disabilities, young and old, get the care they need to live at home.
Thank you, Rosemary. So many of us know, it's no secret, that youth with disabilities are underserved when it comes to centers for independent living across the country. And I think it's really important, and it's, like Justin said, it's our responsibility to get out and create a revolution. And part of that revolution includes getting youth to get involved and to care about the disability rights movement, but also not to be at risk and not to put themselves at risk. So what can youth do, or what can anyone do to make sure that that doesn't happen? One thing that I want to start by saying is that I think it's really important and essential and critical to the movement in the future for Centers for Independent Living to connect with their local parent organizations, to make sure that parents know what Centers for Independent Living are, and so that youth can also come to a center and engage, whether or not they're looking for services at that moment in time, that they're at least introduced to adult role models with disabilities that are working at the center, so that they know that centers are an option for them when they're transitioning, or if they want to connect with the center beforehand, that they know that it's not just all about their parents activating services for them on their behalf, but it's about youth connecting with people that can teach them peer support, give them peer role modeling, and can learn about the disability rights movement and their disability culture from a different perspective other than a family member. So all of us know, I think, that are from centers, but for the youth on the call, I think it's, or webinar, I think it's really essential that we be proactive and that we develop our own independent living plan. And Centers for Independent Living can help you do that, but you can also start by doing it yourself and connecting with somebody who can help you successfully complete your plan. So in your plan, some of the things you might want to consider is, where do you want to live when you're not living with your family, or when you're out of school? What type of services will you need? What type of assistive technology will you need? What community resources will you need? What will your health insurance cover? That's key. I meet a lot of young people who don't know anything about their health care coverage, let alone what it's like to transition from pediatric care to adult health care. Who are your allies? How will you reach your goals? And will you need a support team? All great reasons to connect with your local Center for Independent Living. So last but not least, and we're almost out of time before question and answers, I'm going to move to question and answers next. Right now, before we go into the poster contest announcement, and see if anybody today has any questions about what Sarah and I have shared, or if you just have any comments about what's been shared so far. No comments, no questions? Yes, Rosemary just said, please feel free to use the chat feature there on the left-hand side of the screen if you have a question. Rosie has a comment. I think you all did a fantastic job on the webinar today. I look forward to learning more. The folks from Community Resources for Independent Living said, we have a question, but I have to type it out. It's okay. We'll be patient and wait. That's why we left some time for question and answers. So for the youth that are on the call, do you feel that today's presentation gave you some answers about what the Olmsted decision is, what Olmsted's all about? If yes, hit the green check mark. Or if you're new and didn't know what Olmsted was about, or Justin's vision before today, hit the check mark if you felt this webinar was helpful. So 7 people felt that it was helpful and 29 folks didn't answer. All right, looks like we have some questions now and some comments. Excellent webinar, one of the best I've participated in. SBILC group, what can you do to facilitate to transition from pediatric healthcare to adult healthcare? Well, number one is you can have a conversation with your pediatric doctor, your primary care physician, or your pediatrician, and ask them if they have any ideas, or not ideas, but if they have, if they can work with you on a transition plan so that you don't see your pediatrician after the age of 18 or 21, whatever you feel is age appropriate to transition. Many youth with disabilities end up seeing their pediatrician well into their adult life because they never had a transition plan, and because adults with disabilities are often seen as childlike, and therefore pediatricians don't transition them because they feel like they could be served just as well under pediatric care as they could adult health care. So creating a healthcare transition plan is just as important as any other plan. And you need to know who are the other doctors or medical professionals that are going to be able to assist you when you transition from your pediatric doctor. And it can be a very scary thing moving from the person you've seen all of your life to someone new. It's really important to interview and be a part of that process. Carolyn said, what do you do when family members override decisions to place a member of a family into a rest home? Well, I think that it's really important for people to think about those things in advance and to be prepared, and to have an IL plan for that time in their life, making sure that we're being supportive of our family members and making sure that they're making informed decisions on where they want to live when that time comes in their life. Sarah, do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, this is Sara Triano, and this question comes from my mother because we had a personal situation where we wanted to place my grandma in her home in the community, but we had an uncle who overrided our decision and put her in a rest home. And when she was in that rest home, she had a do not resuscitate order, but within the order it said that they should continue food and hydration for her, but they didn't read that fine print, and we got a call after like 5 days. The nursing home had literally starved and dehydrated my grandmother almost to death. And so my mom and I went down there, got her transferred into a hospital, but we watched as we were both pretty helpless. Because my uncle who had the power had overridden our decision. So I know that I can't answer the question because it's a personal situation that we both just went through that was very tragic for us.
Thank you, Sarah. Corrine asks, will this PowerPoint be made available on the website? Yes, all of our webinars are archived and available on yodisabledproud.org. Krill asks, why is the governor trying to cut Social Security and home support services, CalWORKs, and schools? Well, that's a very good question, Vanessa. I think it's really important for all of us to continue doing the advocacy that we've been doing over the years. Obviously, Californians and all people across the nation need to be informed on how these services protect us and could protect somebody else who's not thinking that they're eligible for them at this point in their life. But we also need to inform government on the fact that the baby boomers and people with disabilities are living longer, and therefore we need to look at other ways to bring revenue into our state that will support those of us who are living in the community and those of us that are living longer that weren't expected to. Sarah, do you want to add anything about that? Okay. Moving on. Thank you, CIL. Center for Independent Living in Berkeley said, very nice job. Vivian asks, how do you convince other communities to work with the disability community? Sarah, do you want to take this on since SBILC has a social justice approach?
Sure, and I was also going to say to the prior question, why is the governor trying to cut all of this? We should look back to Justin's vision. He is doing some stuff that we find very unjust. So hate the injustice, but love the unjust. How would we approach the governor in California with love? Really hard thing to do, right? But how would we also, again, use the government for all in Justin's vision to say, that we're not creating a government for all when we cut these social services, and especially when money is going out of our state into wars, into, that there's corporate tax loopholes, and the money isn't going where it should be spent. And then the third part, how are we building solidarity with other communities to address these issues of the cuts? Not just, you say, why is he cutting all these different things? We have, CFILC does a beautiful Disability Capital Action Day. What if we joined Capital Action Days with other communities? We get like 3,000 to 3,000 people there. If we joined with a bunch of other communities, we could have 50,000 people there, and perhaps that might have a bigger impact. And then the question about how do you convince other communities to work with the disability community is, we have members within the disability community who share identities within a lot of these other social justice communities. And they feel like they have to split their identity when they come to the disability movement, and they shouldn't have to. So if we made them feel welcome and approached these other communities with the leadership of our members who share identities in other communities, I think it would be a lot more effective. That's just one of the ways. And I will say, too, that, again, Justin's vision of advocacy through love, we often approach other social justice communities in anger because they've done something that's not accessible to us. And it is important to address the inaccessibility, but again, how would we approach them in advocacy through love? What would that look like? It would be very different than advocacy as usual, as Justin said, but how can we approach them in a way that's not anger and fear-based?
Thank you, Sarah. Michael Beers from Summit Independent Living Center says, y'all made my Friday. Rock on. Thank you, Michael. Greg at Krill says, is there a link to all the links we've seen today? We can create a page with all of the links, Greg, but we will also have this webinar PowerPoint online at yodisabledproud.org next week. But we will, if it would be helpful, we can just put all of the hyperlinks onto one page as well to be a supplement to the PowerPoint. Nellie Demilier. I learned a lot about Justin Dart and the Olmstead Act, Olmstead decision, because of this webinar. Great job, Christina, Sarah T., and Sarah M. Vanessa asked, oh, never mind, going to the next one. You guys aren't answering why he is doing it. Answering why he is cutting those services, is that what you're referring to, Dave? Well, neither of us work with the governor, so I'm not sure that we could say why he's making those decisions, but I also wouldn't blame the governor on the entire list of cuts. It's also the legislature, and earlier Sarah talked about how important Justin said voting was, and I just like to reiterate that voting is very important, and until we get our legislators and policymakers to understand our issues, and until some of us in our own community are becoming politicians, it's going to take a while to see some change. We're doing a great job of advocating, and we're very passionate about what we believe in, but we need people on the inside, and we also need people that understand our issues and how critical they are to us. Ted Jackson says, this was great for me to hear, through words of Justin Dart from his own mouth, and get a sense of his passion. Thank you, Ted. So we're just about out of time, and the last thing I want to do today is announce our poster contest. Today's webinar was all about what Justin's vision was, but now we want to challenge you guys to share what you think the vision of the disability rights movement is. What we'd like to do is, in California, the youth organizers from Yo Disabled and Proud were able to get legislation passed in 2009 to have Disability History Week recognized during the week of October, the second week of October, which happens to be October 8th through the 12th. We would like to challenge you all to make some art around what the vision of the disability rights movement is. We have some poster contest guidelines. Our poster contest is open to youth with disabilities across the nation between the ages of 14 to 28. Your art can range in size from an 8 by 11 to 11 by 17. Entries should be scanned and/or, I forgot to enter this on here, but can also be mailed to our office, and I will give you our address verbally. You can email your photo or your art in a JPEG file to yopostercontest@cfilc.org before 5 p.m. Pacific Standard Time on August 31st, 2012. The winner will work in collaboration with our graphic designer on staff to have his or her art published on California's 2012 Disability History Week poster. Contest questions should be directed to our youth advocate, Kirk Aranda, at kirk@cfilc.org. And don't forget submissions. The deadline is Friday, August 31st, 2012. These guidelines will be on the Yo website separately, so if you'd like to participate. I'd also like to encourage center staff that are here today to help spread the word about the contest. This is a great way to bring youth together at your center, and you could always enter a group piece of art instead of an individual piece if you'd rather do it that way. We appreciate all of you for joining us today. I want to again thank my co-presenters, Sarah Triano and Sara Moussavian, as well as our moderator, Rosemary, and our captioner, Mary. Thank you all for coming, and I hope that you share all of this information with folks in your community and that you come back and view the webinar again once it's posted on our website. Again, the Yo website where you can get our address, the poster contest guidelines, a copy of this PowerPoint, and a page on the hyperlinks that we've shared with you today is yodisabledproud.org. Again, that's yodisabledproud.org. And if you haven't already, please like us on Facebook. We've been having competitions there to see how many people we can get to like our Facebook page. And we have many ways that you can get active into Yo by taking action on the Yo Disabled and Proud website. Please feel free to sign on to our anti-bullying petition or to look at the other stuff that we have up there on Disability History Week. Thank you again for joining us. Have a wonderful weekend.